ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between.
He's a South Texan poppy poet living that hashtag middle-class gay life. It's Chibi.
She's a little bit Selena, a little bit J-Lo, and a whole lot of Pisces. It's Rocky.
And this is Words and Shit,
the show where you get to know the person behind the poetry.
Brought to you by Write Art Out
and Gemini's Productions.
Hola, Raquel.
Hi, friend. How are you doing, Jimmy?
I mean, we're getting by. You know, it's another day in this crazy thing we called life.
It is. We are trying. We are always trying. And you know what? I will say, because I had my therapy session, that I could not get through this life right now without my therapist.
Shout out to good therapists. I've been through like 4, and I'm like, no, you're not it.
Oh, my therapist for this one, I had a therapist and she kind of did me dirty. And then it took me like almost 2 years to find a new therapist. And I literally was going through, I think I consulted close to like 13, 15 like therapists. No. And I had my little Google Doc of like, let's do my little checklist and we'll just do the speed dating run. And then for a hot minute, I was like seeing 3 therapists like regularly till I like you're not the one, you don't get my rose and you don't get my rose. So I had my down to my last one. And it was funny because I told my therapist that. And because at first she was like, I know you're like starting out with me, but please like try to see other therapists to see if I'm a good fit for you. And I was like, oh, I have. You're in my top final 3. Like, you're good. Like, and she was surprised. She's like, nobody really like takes me seriously. I was like, it's okay. I really have I have good insurance. So I'm like, my copay is like pennies. I can afford to like.
I was gonna say, like, can we get our money back if it don't work out? Like, a refund policy, because I am tired of paying for therapists that just don't do it. You know, everything else I can return if it doesn't work out.
Yes,
return my therapy sessions.
Ain't that the fucking truth sometimes?
Oh, Lord, no, I feel you. And it's like it's so good to have someone that helps you just kind of like process it. It's so weird because like every time like I start with a therapist, like, so what brought you here? And I'm like, I don't know. Have you looked outside? Like.
See, that's where you go wrong. I literally have a Google Doc. I had a legit Google Doc, and I would share that to my therapist, be like, we're going to go one by one, why I think. And it was really funny because I think my therapist was just like, remember that Google Doc that you brought up? And you thought this is why you came in? And this is what the topic that you said you didn't need to talk about? Actually, that's your root harm, trauma. And I'm like, that's why you're so good.
Oh, but yeah, there's so much happening in the world and so much that we go through on just like a regular basis that just requires so much processing and
yes,
you know, all of the emotions.
All the emotions. My therapist has me. She's funny because she does a lot of. I low-key think she's a little bruja, and that's why we get along. She won't say it, but I think she is. But one of the things that she always tells me to do is like journal and write, and we do writing exercise. And like, I know that it's good because I pout and I'm like such a brat about it. I'm like, I don't want to write because I know that writing takes so much out of me to process. And I feel like if I write, I'm giving these feelings power, but then that's why we need to write so we can like process, give it power and like release or put language or a name to what is happening around us.
Yeah, because until you do that, it's all just kind of like nebulously floating up in here and in there and doing all of the things, and you're but then like when you have to like put it in concrete words, right? Yes. And I love the way you put it, that you kind of like releases it, right? And it's a great way to kind of like release emotions out of us, especially when you're dealing with like heavy emotions like grief, like anger, like loss, like even heavy happy emotions, because sometimes we're just there's a lot happening in here.
Yes.
And the power of not just putting it into writing, but then creating some form of art from it, right? And then the power that has for other people that maybe don't have the words to process, don't have the language in which to express themselves, and how art and poetry, because we're here for poetry, has that power to connect with people and give them the language to understand how to go through some of these really heavy emotions that sometimes, not all of us have great insurance that allows us to shop through 13 therapists.
Consultations are free sometimes. They'll do 15 minutes. So don't let that deter you. But seeing 3 therapists at the same time, yes, that is that is really flaunting my good insurance. That city employee insurance.
For the rest of us, we have poetry. And luckily there are poets out there in the world that really have a masterful grasp of how to process such heavy emotions in ways that can connect with the reader. And that was one of my favorite things about our conversation with Leigh, was in going through how she tackles these really, really heavy subjects with such a light and delicate hand that allows us as the readers to like connect without feeling like we're being burdened,
Exactly. And I feel like she does such a great job about the performance of what it means for like grief and all these emotions. But let you hear from her. So let's go into it. Leigh Lucas is a writer in San Francisco. Her chapbook, Landsickness, from Tupelo Press 2024, was selected by Chen Chen for the 2023 Second Garden Poetry Chapbook Award. She has been awarded residency at Tin House Community of Writers in Kenyon, and has been recognized with AWP's Kurt Brown Prize, as well as with as Best New Poet nomination, Best of Net nomination, and multiple Pushcart Prize nominations. Leigh's poems can be found in the Academy of American Poets Poem A Day, Poet Lore, Smartish Pace, and elsewhere. She holds a BA from Stanford and an MFA from Warner Lewis. Here's our conversation with Leigh Lucas.
Yay.
Yeah.
Hey, Leigh, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chitty. Hi, Raquel.
Hi, we're so excited to have you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is for anyone that doesn't know, which is everyone listening to this show, except for like 9 other people. This is a nice little reunion between Leigh and I. We were at Tin House a couple of years ago. And I don't think we've actually, because you weren't at AWP.
I was at AWP this year, but I didn't see you somehow.
I wasn't there this year. That's why.
Oh, gotcha.
We were at different ones. And so outside of like random group chat celebrations, we haven't reconnected. And I'm so excited because it's been a few years. And at Tin House, you were working on a manuscript and I was floored.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love the work you brought to Tin House too, but that was a fun summer. I was enormously pregnant and very hot. But I loved our workshop group. Everyone brought such good work. I was kind of working on the very final edits of what is now my chapbook coming out. So those were some of the poems almost in their final form that made it into that book.
Yeah, and now that's coming out. By the time this airs, it will have come out.
Yes.
But coming out June 1st, and we'll dive into all of that in a moment for sure.
Great. Yes, but before we kind of dive into your poetry and who you are, we love to do this like really quick grounding question that sometimes is just like, whoo, just to kind of set the mood. So let's start. Leigh, how's your heart doing today?
My heart is good today. It's gorgeous in San Francisco today. It's beautiful and sunny, as you can see, sort of in the reflection.
No.
And my mornings around here are hectic and fun. My husband and I have a 1.5-year-old, and she was being crazy, running around. Good vibes. So
amazing. I mean, that must be really busy and such a shift right? Just to have like another little small human in your family.
It's a huge shift. Never sleeping in again was something I hadn't wrapped my head around. But yeah, we're up every day at 6:45, no matter what we did the night before. So
yes, I am very happy for you.
That is a lot. Before we started recording, Leigh and I were talking about our dogs, and I have a new puppy, and Leigh has a child, and both of our dogs that were previously only children in the house are having issues.
They really are. It's a tough transition.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they will become the best of sisters, we hope.
I will say the very early puppy stage is pretty similar to having a kid when you have to get up in the middle of the night and take them out because they still can't hold it. So I think that's a very tough job being a dog parent.
I'm there. This morning started with me having to take everything out of the kennel and put it in the washing machine.
Yes.
There was an aroma.
Yes. I do not miss those days.
We'll get through it. It just builds a tighter bond. God damn it. I'm just going to drink my water. Stay hydrated, y'all. Okay, so to kick things off as a little icebreaker, a little amuse-bouche, a little teaser, as it were, for people tuning in that are barely getting to know each other, we like to start off with a game we call speed dating. We will ask you a series of questions, 4, and we encourage you to answer as concisely as you feel is necessary, which is not always easy for poets, and that's fine.
Okay.
So, first question. When you need a moment to yourself, where is your favorite place to go?
Ooh. There's a little coffee shop around the corner from my house called Coffee Movement. And it's the best coffee shop in the Bay Area. So just said that to be extremely controversial. I'm here to start some fights. And I love it there. And all the baristas say hi and know my order. And it makes me feel part of a community in my neighborhood. And I love it.
The local coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. I love it. Okay. So I am, you were in your mom era, right? And in multiple ways. For your new book that's coming out, and then also your baby. But I love how like a lot of with social media and especially women, they're in their different eras. Like I'm in my senior era, or like Doña era, or I'm in like my villain era, right? So I kind of want to ask you, like, what's your favorite era so far of your life? Yeah, let's do that. I know those are really not a speak question, but like, I'm so sorry.
My favorite era of my life. That is so crazy. My husband always says I have a recency bias, but I think it's just like optimism or something. But I just turned 36 and like 6 months ago, I turned 36. And I was telling him, I was like, I think this is my best vibe yet. I'm like, I feel like I have time to write, like more time to write than I've had in the past because of like my jobs were more time consuming. I have like this happy family and warm home. And I sort of feel like I'm at the start of a very happy, content era. So anyway, I think I kicked it off really maybe this birthday.
Ooh, amazing. Well, happy belated and happy half birthday, I think.
Yeah. Could be celebrated.
Yes.
As someone who will be turning 37 later this year, I am very much, look, I'm looking forward to my 40s. Okay.
Yeah.
She is seasoned. She is gainfully employed. She is artistically thriving. Like I hear that. I'm so glad I'm not in my 20s.
Couldn't agree more.
And then I just quick. I just have to, touch on Raquel's speed dating questions, because it's always like, what was your hardest trauma to unpack?
No, it's never like that. I would never ask that as a speaker, but I will definitely like kind of go in because you know what? I'm a Pisces, and like speed dating questions, we just want to go deep. We just want to go deep. I want to know a little bit about you.
I love them.
All right, to go back to something that is speed dating, or maybe isn't. This is a very controversial question. In the past, I asked this of everyone. What is your favorite thing to eat? Whether it be a single item or a food dish or a whole meal. I don't know. What's your favorite thing to eat?
Pasta. Pasta in its various forms has been my tried and true favorite since the early days. Sort of my comfort food. It's like if I can't think of anything that sounds tasty to eat, it's like my solid go-to. So there you go.
Follow-up question. Do you make your own pasta? Do you use pre-made pasta, or do you just go out all the time?
I use just the pre-made stuff in the box. Nothing fancy. Just throw a little Parmesan cheese, olive oil, salt, and pepper. People forget the pepper. That's really it. That's the whole thing. Maybe a little pecorino if I got both cheeses. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Love it. Okay, so this is my final speed dating question. We are kind of asking all this of for the season, I kind of want to know, what is your song that is getting you through the day, getting you through the month? You're just yes, this hypes me up. It's on repeat.
Yeah. I listened to it this morning to pump myself up for this very conversation. It's Don't Leave Me This Way by Thelma Houston, or it's a cover. And I pretend to do the bass line while it's on, and it really just brings me to life. I love it.
Love it.
I'm going to have to pull it up. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that I can get into your mindset.
Yes.
Well, I love this. Really great little icebreaker. I feel like we are ready to dive into to the life and works of Leigh Lucas. So would you please kick us off with a poem?
All right. Dirtbag. At the funeral, his other former girlfriend gives the eulogy. I sit in the pew. Sitting in front of me and behind me, and also to both sides, are more other former girlfriends. Something heartfelt shared by X on the mic sets off a chorus of sniffles among the X's in rows. They tuck their hair behind their little ears. There are so many different people to hate. So I keep things simple and hate everyone. I know why he picked me, a novelty. I wore Mary Janes and high-neck dresses and labeled the shelves tuna and nuts and breakfast items soup. My hair was always squeaky clean. Now I am someone entirely new. A black dog, a broken heart. I revel in being more like him now. At home, I put on my sunglasses and turn off the lights. Sitting on the toilet where light can't peek through, I pretend the plunger's a white cane. My chin held too high and to the side, I run through gruesome imitations of anger, contempt, disgust, sadness, surprise. The world will be unsettled. I will unsettle them.
Amazing. First of all, whether or not it's true, that is a great way to set up. As a chismosa myself, as a gossiper, I would be like, what? Who's here? Like, wow. So lucky he's dead because he would catch these hands immediately. It kind of reminded me of this, like, I don't know if you are on TikTok or like, sometimes they have them on Reels. There was like a skit a lot of people were doing where they would put their phone down and you just see people kind of like visiting, like going to a wake and visiting the bodies and like kind of whispering and be like, why are all your like girlfriends and wives here? Like, you didn't pay me enough as your lawyer. Like, now they know all about each other.
I have not seen this. It sounds right up my alley.
Yes, I would definitely recommend that. But yeah, I kind of want to like, let's talk about this because I love how you're like, let's keep it simple. I'm giving hate to everyone, right? So let's think about this as like a villain origin story, right? Why this concept? Is this now your like? Did you like tap into your villain era of like, I'm gonna show y'all that I can bring the hate and the haterade?
Yeah, I think there were a few things I was really interested in exploring in this poem. One of them is kind of pettiness. And I think it's like an emotion that is almost taboo or it's certainly not valued or celebrated. It's a shameful emotion. It's something we acknowledge, we all sometimes express, but it's not something we're proud of. But I actually think pettiness is super interesting. And I think I wanted to like really ask myself, like, what is like the scariest thing to admit about myself? What is the hardest thing to acknowledge? And it might be being petty in a moment where you'd expect your greatest character traits to shine. But I think the truth about grief and grieving in hard situations is often your reaction might be something more surface. Like you're actually surviving the moment because you're willing to tap into humor or pettiness or gossip. And actually that's a fantastic survival technique, frankly, of a bad situation. Bringing like a little bit of levity and dark humor is such a powerful thing. And then, yeah, I do think of this as my villain origin story poem. And I love villain origin stories. I love them in movies. I love them in books. I love them in fairy tales. And thinking about this poem as my villain origin story was a lot of fun. Like, how did this persona of myself go from this respectable, squeaky-haired, organized gal to the ultimate villain who was going to disquiet the world and make everyone uncomfortable with her pain? So that was sort of the project of this poem. And I thought a lot also about the concept of performance and how all of us, even when we are feeling really authentic, it's necessary to perform throughout the day, just to be polite to people, to keep your job, it's just a part of life. And when do you either like put on a new mask, put on like your scariest mask and let yourself perform that part of yourself too? Because I think all of these selves just sort of live within us, and different stressful or sad or grief-ridden situations can bring out different masks. And I wanted to sort of explore that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To quote the iconic 1990s classic, The Mask. We all wear masks, metaphorically.
I'm going to put that quote in the beginning of my book. Just
Yes.
I have to pay like $80,000 for the copyright, but it's worth it. Worth it.
So worth it.
I have a quick question. Speaking of the book, and then I want to dive into a few other things. Where in the book does this poem live? I'm so curious.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to talk about this because I wrote a full-length collection, and then when that was fully complete, I pulled out a portion of it and submitted to some chapbook contests. So where it falls in the full-length collection is in the beginning of the third section of 7.
Okay.
So it's kind of like you understand the situation. It's because it's a narrative book, but you sort of understand what's happened, where the character is, and then her villain era kicks off.
Mm-hmm.
And where I've placed it in the chapbook, and I actually got help from a really smart poet friend, is as the final poem. Because I only share the first 2 sections in the chapbook, and basically kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger, if you will, that the villain era has been entered. Stay tuned for more.
So this is basically Maleficent, right? And if you want to find out what happens afterwards, you have to go read Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
Oh, so exciting. Okay. So then that leads me to, let's go back to the idea of performance, right? And masks and how we're perceived, right? In the world. Kind of like how you said that we kind of have to shift, put on these masks to be polite and things like that. But some people don't. Some people have one mode and no filter, right? And you get the same person in every situation, and just everything is always just coming out, right? And it's interesting to me that you said, like we have to, and some people don't think that we have to.
Mm-hmm.
How does that show up in your life? How do you balance that idea of like, this is what I'm feeling inside and what I would really love to express right now versus I'm gonna be quiet, but when I go home, I'm gonna write about you.
Yeah. So something I found really interesting is when I was experiencing grief, all of a sudden my ability to wear the appropriate mask was actually hugely hindered. So I would find myself telling someone I was not close to how I was feeling, or telling them some awful details about my grief experience. Sort of some common sense things you learn as you grow up and mature, you share intimate details with people who you're close to and who you trust. And you don't do that with somebody waiting for the light to turn green with you So I found that it was a really startling realization that sort of my ability to filter had, decreased. So sometimes, now that you put it this way, sometimes I'm realizing that maybe these people who have no ability to wear masks are actually hugely suffering in some way, because it makes sense to me now when I think about my own experience. So like the person who, can't pull it together to be polite on the subway, I have to imagine there's like a real reason for that, perhaps. Because as soon as I started healing and working with a therapist and getting back on track, like that all came naturally to me again. But working with her, we actually had to practice. So we would check in twice a week during our session, and she would say, all right, is there anything that you shared this week with someone who it wasn't right to share with them? And I'd be like, yes. I was at a party, and then I started talking about how I was experiencing this, and I did not want to share that with that person at that time. And so it was interesting. I had to relearn that muscle of wearing masks, like wearing the appropriate masks. So I think the good lesson of it all is to have a lot of grace for people who seem unwilling to wear a mask. In fact, maybe they're actually unable to at that time. It's a very interesting thing, because I almost can't relate to nowadays. Like, I almost can't relate to my inability at the time to have a filter and share appropriately, but it was really something I was experiencing.
No, it's really interesting. I think these past couple of episodes that we've had with other poets, each one kind of have spoken about grief in one way or another. And again, it's just so interesting because I feel like we don't want to acknowledge grief because it hurts so much. But this has now been coming up so many in our interviews that it's universal. Like, all of us are experiencing grief in a different way, and it's how we're managing. And I think I kind of want to talk about your new book, Landsickness, because Chen Chen we had Chen Chen on this podcast, a beautiful individual. And Chen Chen wrote this beautiful review for you, basically how you're navigating grief in this book, right? So I kind of want to know, like, why Landsickness? And is this, like, on this journey of, like, exploring grief, and obviously talking to your therapist of, like, whether or not to share your grief with people who might be not willing, or, like, not, or should be the ones that are closer to you. Have you, at the end of this book, like, did you find a way to process that grief, feel lighthearted, or was the journey to feel light from the grief is in writing this book called Landsickness?
I went back and forth on whether writing about it was making me feel better or worse. I do think that humor and, like, all poets. Oh, did we lose Raquel?
She'll be back.
Okay.
But it's fine.
I do think that using dark humor to sort of re-experience some of the events in my life was very healing. Like, at the time, was I able to see the dark humor in it? Sometimes, but not always. But in writing it, it was an important part of the project to bring some levity and dark humor to even the hardest parts. And that was a good experience overall. And it was something that's allowed me also to sort of, like, compartmentalize it and put it on the shelf and say, you know what, I wrote about this. I did honor to this experience that was really difficult for me. And now there will be a time that I'm going to write about other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It can definitely be a healing process. And I think part of what makes it what kind of sets up the levity at which you talk about it, the kind of, like, frankness and straightforwardness of it, is the way you set it up. Your opening lines, like, just like, really set the tone, and also, the scene, right? Just in this one, at the funeral, his other former girlfriend gives the eulogy. Like, okay. I hear that. In that one line, you say so much, right? And just the way that you say it, the syntax of that line gives us the idea of how you're approaching this situation, right? I was going back through, again, the poem she shared at Tin House, and there was another one that started, "In my new life, I must learn everything again." Yes, mustn't we all? But wait, what is this new life? And what was the life before? And what are you learning now, right? So I would love to hear a little bit about
that, and maybe in terms of process, maybe in terms of, like the intent behind it, or wherever you want to take this conversation, because the opening lines of your poem just constantly have a way of just immediately being like, I'm staying for the rest of this. I don't know where we're going, but I trust the author and the speaker is going to take me there in a way that, I can move with them.
Yeah, I do take seriously the idea of like taking care of my reader, especially in writing about things that could exclude a reader. So like, I'm going to write about an intimate relationship with someone you don't know, or I'm going to write about this very specific grief experience that happened largely like in my psyche. So I do think a lot about the reader's experience and like inviting them into the moment with me. And the other thing that's important to me is I actually really love to use plain language and to use tone as my tool to make the plain language still artful. So often in my revision process, I'm actually stripping out more flowery prose, and I'm thinking a lot about tone, diction, and then syntax, like you mentioned. So that's really where a lot of my tinkering happens. And I love a sentence that sort of thuds at the end, especially if I'm saying something seemingly plain, but I want it to have some emotional resonance. And that's something I think about a lot. And I think about it in first lines. I think about it in last lines. And then I also, I do this kind of naturally, but I've learned to turn it up a little bit. I love a short, choppy little sentence sprinkled in there. I think that it can do a lot of work to make the reader take a breath and pause and stop and have a short little unadorned sentence sprinkled in among others that are doing something different. Those are kind of like the tools that I've found I have most readily at my disposal. So one thing that writing over time has taught me is like the things that I'm most interested in that maybe I have the best handle over. I've decided to do those more instead of to like get every poetry muscle, to flex every poetry muscle, to try to be, I'm like, here are the things that I am as a poet. Let me try to turn those to volume 11. And I've liked the poems where I've been able to successfully do that.
Yeah. And even, like what you were just talking about happens in that first line. At the funeral, his other former girlfriend gives the eulogy, period. I sit in the pew. Stands a break. It's just like,
yeah, I'm telling you, as a Chiefs Mosa, I was like, I'm in. What are you going to do? No, I really love that you're talking about like you really make sure you take care of the reader. And everyone writes for the most part for themselves. But I always really love it when they're like really taking the reader into thought, into the process, and how accessible or just how you want to really just relay your message. So with that, I think this is a perfect opportunity for you to have other members, your readers, your audience, listen to your second poem.
Okay, great. There's an epigraph for this poem by the poet Susan Briante. Scientists have discovered trees talk through roots, owls warn through wing flash. maybe rocks too vibrate in frequencies beyond our ears. Communication buzzes around us unrecognized. End quote. Department of Quiet Phenomena. Poetry is to listen and speak at different frequencies. It denies lines in the sand, over land, over fistfuls of ocean. Reminds us if we grip fewer things, what we need remains. The rest sinks like stone. I know the world outside is cold, is violent, but here on the couch, we are in love. I stay quiet to say, because of you, I feel at home. When you call on a break from work, I envision you on a bench in the shadow of the Transamerica, hiding a midday cigarette. When I say there is so much beauty, this is what I mean.
First of all, thank you for sending us the poem
Yes.
so that we could look at it. For anyone that's listening, this poem is going to come out in Alta Journal. Actually, by the time this airs, it probably will already be out in Alta Journal. So please go check it out, because on the page visually, it's doing a lot of really interesting things. Backslashes, bold print. Arrows.
Oh, wait, I have to stop you.
Why?
Those are my reading notes.
Oh.
The poem appears on the page actually in a very conventional way.
Wow.
No,
If you want to see where I breathe, that's where you look at those slashes.
okay.
Oh, and then the arrows, what are the arrows? Are they?
The arrows are, I forget the word for it, but like, say it.
Inflection.
Yes, thank you.
That's what I thought it was. Okay. Well,
Yes.
so I was looking at this because also the document, it's a Google Doc that was shared with us, is Department of Quiet Phenomena for Reading, right? And so oftentimes we are challenged as poets, or at least I am challenged as a poet, and I've been told this by my father, wherein my poem on the page does not read the way I speak it, right? And so we often want our readers to read it the way we intended it to be heard, right? And I think including these like slashes, these bolds, these arrows, at first I thought it was kind of like a circular, like go back to that line. And then I was like, wait, no, I think you've solved the problem of how do we get our readers to read our poems the way we say them? I don't know. Okay, so it won't appear this way, but I'm making an argument for it.
I mean, I might look it over.
So it was because I really love when the format of a poem is so different from just what we're kind of used to seeing. And it really just, even having the arrows on top of it, I was like, wow, you really have us like going everywhere, right? Like the arrows makes it feel like, especially when you're talking about like how the world is outside is cold and violent, and it's just like kind of a little chaotic with all the arrows and the slashes, but you really emphasize like, this is where the calm is, right? This, you, and it's pointing at like your person that you love. I was like, wow, so much emphasis, like grounding.
I might have to keep this.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, Chippy's also an editor too, so Chippy's like
I love anything that disrupts, the norm. I'm a rebel at heart, and so like I was like, fuck yes, this poem is doing so much, but it is also doing so much without the arrows and
the dashes. Yeah,
I don't want to take away from the content of it because of the form in which we're seeing it. But I would love to hear more about this idea of the Department of Quiet Phenomena, right?
Yeah.
The whole department for it. Talk about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this poem. This poem started in a very different place than it ended. It was not initially a love poem, actually. But running through the concept the whole time, I had this idea of like, what if the poets of the world were actually part of some positive bureaucratic organization, and our role was actually to change the world through invisible and small acts. Like mentioned in the epigraph, I was really inspired by this Susan Briante book. But in that opening quote, she talks about how, you know, trees talk through roots and owls talk through wing flash. And we have no idea beyond that if the natural world has millions of ways to communicate that we actually aren't smart enough to understand. And I actually think chances are that's probable. And there's all of this happening sort of behind the scenes or beyond our ability to recognize it. And it feels like a very good comparison to poetry, because it can feel a little bit hopeless writing poems sometimes. I don't know if you all feel this way. And you think, you know, I'm putting my heart and soul into this, and it's such a quiet work of art. It's going to reach just a few people. I mean, depending on where a poet is in their career, but you know, I'm on draft 85 of this. Would my time be better spent taking action in a different way?
The futility of poetry.
But the Department of Quiet Phenomena believes otherwise. It believes that poetry actually does have an ability to make those tiny little shifts in the universe that can create like real change and real healing and real sense of not feeling alone on this earth. And I've heard other poets say this, and it does give me a lot of hope. They say, I'm sure you all have heard this, that poetry always comes out at births and weddings and funerals. Like throughout time, we have found that poetry holds this place in almost every culture, maybe every culture, at these very important moments in life. So clearly we do recognize that it has some power. But the Department of Quiet Phenomena, maybe it already exists. We just haven't named it, but it's all of us writing poems in our bedrooms and making tiny little shifts in the world that will be seismic altogether.
Listen, it kind of was very interesting for you to tell me, like, talk about how these like separate acts that are quiet can still have such a loud effect on the world, right? And it really just reminded me of like Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategy. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but her thing is that in the world, we always like look for leaders, or we're looking at like in the nature of like lions and like the top of the food chain, right? To be these exemplary ways of like viewing how to make change. And it's really like the ants, the tiny little ants that are working together, who are building these beautiful structures with like 10 times to 100 times their body weight, you know, carrying it. And so I would like to, or like even with like the birds and seagulls, they're going in a V formation, but they change each time and they have to fly together. So I like to think that what you're also talking about is that it's not only a department, but it's also a little bit of like different ants making these very strong structures. And it can be beautiful, and as well as they can be really, really strong. And if you step on them and critique them, ants will bite back.
I love that.
Yeah.
I would say poets are closest to ants if you had to look at the animal kingdom. But I mean that, yeah, it's a compliment.
Yeah.
We are resilient, and we are making all these tiny, tiny moves. But I think collectively, I think we have seen the power of poetry collectively, right? Especially as we start to like lift each other up and champion each other's work. And I have thoroughly enjoyed seeing the progression of your work. You said something now I lost it that I was going to like bounce off of. But sign me up for that department, please and thank you. I'm more than happy to be a chair on that department. But yeah, I'm so here for it. And I love the tenderness in which this was approached, right? Because I do believe that looking at the animal kingdom and then seeing our own impact and how we communicate with each other, I think we could all use a little bit more communication in our lives and listen.
Yes.
And open hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like
I did think it was kind of a fun challenge to write a poem with words, because that's our medium, but about listening and like what word choices would I use in a poem about listening? And the one line that's very sort of outside of my typical repertoire is "the rest sinks like stone." And I kept that line in because to me, it was achieving that, the idea of listening, or something about that felt true to my project of writing a poem about being a better listener. Mm-hmm. So, and I guess I'm also doing that short sort of declarative sentence.
Nope, love it.
No, that's what you said. You like those like short, choppy, you know.
I like one of those every now and then.
So
yes.
I kind of want to bring, we could keep talking forever. I kind of want to bring this to a close, as we kind of started with the idea of like eras and the eras that we are moving through, been through, moving into, right? You touched on it a little bit, kind of moving into your upper mid 30s and beyond, now with a soon to be 2-year-old, bless your heart. So this is the way we've been concluding each interview this season, is in asking, like, as you look at the next chapter of your life, what would be the title of the poem about the next chapter of your life?
Oh my God. Well, let me answer this with all the poems I wrote before Landsickness are on my computer in a folder called Letters to Imaginary Men. But if that resonates with anyone about what their 20s were like, because I hope most of those poems will never see the light of day, and thank goodness for that. But that definitely feels like one chapter I had. This upcoming one, this is a hard question.
I know. We are evil people to ask poets to come up with titles on the spot.
Let's see. Actually, you know what? Maybe this is a softball response, but I'm going to say Department of Quiet Phenomena could be my next era. I'm just trying to do quiet things, be happy, be a good friend, be a good mom, be a good sort of citizen. I'm just trying to sort of take care of the little things right now. I'm not trying to make a big splash.
No pun intended.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. It's been wonderful for you to reflect on all the different eras and stages of your life, and giving us like even hope that even if you feel like you're just writing to yourself, you know, in your own space, it's still having a change either within yourself or for the people around you. So thank you for kind of reminding us like we have our own power in that. So before you go, please, for your audience, for your new audience, hopefully your new readers from this podcast, where can the people find your work and you?
Yes, I have a website, LeighLucas.com. That's where I have a lot of my poems up. And then I'm on Instagram at Leigh Lucas. And a little bit on Twitter at Leigh Luke.
Just a little bit on Twitter these days.
Yeah, just a little bit on. Yeah, that's all I'll say about Twitter.
Say less, for sure. The chapbook is called Landsickness. It is available from Tupelo Press. It was the 2023 Sunken Garden Poetry Chapbook winner, chosen specifically by Chen Chen. Go out and get your copy. I can't wait to get my hands on it, and I can't wait to see the full length whenever that comes out, wherever that comes out. So excited for you and your work to be out in the world. And everyone listening, go get it now. What are you waiting for?
Yes.
Podcast. Thank you, Leigh, so much.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you, Raquel. This was so much fun to talk to both of you.
No, thank you. I'm so excited. Hi, friend. That was really great. Again, another great episode. I'm really thinking about the idea of this quiet phenomenon, right? The Department of Quiet Phenomenon, and how all of us really, again, just even though we're by ourselves, we write, and sometimes we write in our diaries, right? And we're like, do we think that this matters? It really does. It has such a major impact on the world. And I'm so glad that the language that Leigh had talked about really gives it more of life, of like this validation towards it.
And I love that it's a department of quiet phenomena, right? Because it takes a whole collective, it takes a whole community of people to make that change. And I think it also kind of gives a nod to, the organizers, the people on the ground, the people behind the scenes, right? That help create spaces for poets to come together, that champion poets' works, the publishers, the editors, the typesetters, the cover designers, right? All of this that has to happen in the background for the work to find an audience and make that impact, right? So shout out. Yes, shout out to everyone. And even if you think that, I really loved how Leigh was talking about how she is taking care of her reader. Even if that reader is you, it's still important. Take care of yourselves.
Yes. So, I feel like we need to go and thank some people.
That's right. So that we can go be in community with our own Department of Quiet Phenomena. So thank you first to our listeners for being here, for sticking with us, for coming back week after week. Season 4 is on a roll.
Ooh, and thank you to the amazing queer artist, Chris Conde. He is from San Antonio, now in New York. He is the one that produced the theme music for this podcast. Thank you for making us seem cool.
You to write art out in the City of San Antonio Department of Arts and Culture, whose support has helped produce this podcast.
And you can follow us on all the social medias, on IG and Twitter at Words and Shh.
And if you want to watch or listen to past episodes, we're going to end this at close to 100 episodes by the time this is over. You can find all those episodes on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review us. Without that, we can't be out there in the internets, into the universe. Please let us know that we exist and that you love our content, because we really do this for you.
Air horns to get us out of here. Until next time, be safe out there.
And take care.